So welcome to another episode of Inside IALR. Today is a fun episode. We're actually recording this in November, but you'll be hearing this in December. So today at IALR, we had the sort of the presentation of a finalized roadmap or strategy for the Controlled Environment Agriculture sector, which is also known as CEA, in Go Virginia Region 3, which that's about a 15 locality area in Southern Virginia. So I'm here today with Scott Lowman, our Vice President of Applied Research. I'm here with Bryan David, who's the Program Director for Go Virginia Region 3, and then Ellie Travis, who's with an Economic Development Specialist with the Virginia Tech Center for Economic and Community Engagement. Thank you all for being here. To start, I'm going to have each of you sort of introduce yourself really quick, your organization, just sort of like big picture what your organization does, and then your role in developing this roadmap for the CEA sector in our region.
Sure. I'm Bryan David. I'm Program Director for Go Virginia Region 3, which is one of 9 regions in the state that is business-led. There are 19 members on the Region 3 Council, over half of them from the private sector, and what our goal is to support through grants and regional collaboration solutions to help transform the Southern Virginia economy into a future-looking, to take advantage of future opportunities, and CEA is certainly one of those opportunities.
I'm Scott Lowman. I'm VP of Research here at the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research. Of course, the Institute is focused on driving economic transformation. We do that through 5 divisions: advanced manufacturing, conference services, advanced learning, economic development, and applied research. Our applied research division is mainly outward focused, so focused on partnerships with academia, partnerships with industry, partnerships with producers and growers. We use that information that we gain from those partnerships to guide our research, and we consider ourselves not really just applied research, but also translational research. It's research that companies can use today. And we pride ourselves in that. Our specialties lie in analytical chemistry, polymer science, microbiology, molecular biology, robotics, computer vision, and then we put all that together and we teamed up with Virginia Tech to launch our Controlled Environment Ag Research Center. And that really encompasses all the above under one roof, and we think it's one of the most unique centers in the United States.
And my name is Ellie Travis. I am a Senior Economic Development Specialist at the Virginia Tech Center for Economic and Community Engagement, previously called the Office of Economic Development. And what our center does is helps provide research and university connections to organizations and communities to help them grow and find their paths to prosperity.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, again, thank you all for being here today. So I think I think the best way to go about this is, Scott, I know we've talked with you in depth more about, what CEA is, what is Controlled Environment Agriculture. But if you want to give, the 30-second overview of what is CEA, I know you had a great presentation earlier about the history, starting from the beginning and where it's going as well. But if you want to give that, sort of what is CEA, and then Bryan and Ellie, I'll sort of turn it over to you two to outline the very general approach that this roadmap strategy lays out for this sector in Go Virginia Region 3.
Sure. So Controlled Environment Ag, or CEA, is just what the name implies. It's growing things in a controlled environment. So it can be in a greenhouse complex that's heated and cooled. It can be in an indoor facility, a brand new one, or a converted indoor facility. The goal is to produce things 365 days a year. It really is agricultural manufacturing to a big extent. And in doing so, it's 7 days a week, 365 days, as opposed to traditional agriculture, which is one crop per season.
And so, yeah, now, Ellie and Bryan, I'll sort of turn it over to you for this strategy roadmap. I know this, I've read through some of it. It's a long document, but what are some of the main points outlined in this?
If I could, Caleb, let me kind of start of how we started down this road, and
Sure.
I'll certainly let Ellie, as one of the principal authors, kind of explain what's in there. I think one of the things that the Region 3 Council, and certainly I recognize with the open of the Innovation Center here, the CEA Innovation Center, was an opportunity to take research and development in an up-and-coming, forming new business sector for Southern Virginia, for the state, frankly, for the nation and the world. It's old. I think we heard today that it started, green indoor growing started in Roman times and comes forward. But with all of that transformation over time came innovation, how to do it cheaper, better, faster, and certainly in a controlled environment, you get that. What the Institute and certainly the Center for CEA does is it brings a research and development capacity to Southern Virginia that heretofore hadn't been here. And so what the Region 3 Council and I recognize is how do we translate that into an economic workforce development initiative? How do we start growing a brand new cluster here? And that gave that was the genesis for the strategy because, I think most everybody, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And so this was an idea of setting something out on paper with good expertise and getting us what should this strategy encompass, and then what are the things that we can do to start implementing that strategy. And so with that, I'll certainly kick it over to Ellie, who then took that as the mission and then certainly delivered, in my opinion, what we saw today.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. So in developing this strategy, it was important for us to understand what the opportunity was and ground that in lots of research and data. So in the ultimate strategy document, we kind of start with the CEA industry in the U.S. and beyond. We see lots of innovation in Europe, for example. We look at economic data and indicators to show sort of the current state of the industry, workforce requirements, and some industry trends to make sure, as we're developing the CEA strategy, that it's poised for growth and it's going to be positive for Region 3 and for Virginia. Then we kind of move into CEA in Virginia overall, who the companies are, what the supply chains and support sectors are that can support Virginia in CEA. And then we break it down further into Region 3 and specifically look at the assets that Region 3 has in agriculture, in workforce, in advanced manufacturing, expertise, land. We look at all of those assets and then talk to lots of people on the ground who are involved in economic development to make sure that this strategy can be implemented in a way that's beneficial for lots of people in the region. And then based on that grounding, we agreed that this is important and it has potential, especially in Region 3. And Region 3 and IALR are really well poised to be the leader in the Commonwealth for the CEA. And so after we've determined that, we then went down to a strategy and roadmap that talks about 6 distinct steps that can be taken to move the CEA strategy forward in Region 3.
Yeah. And that's those 6 steps, I think, I'll let you talk, all 3 of you talk about this in more depth, but I think the general idea, or the primary idea being establish that hub that sort of carries out a lot of these additional strategies. Let's first talk about, the hub that's outlined in here and the strategy. Why is it important to have one hub or one center that's sort of focusing on all different components of this? Because this ties into economic development, as you all have outlined. It ties into economic development, ties into research, ties into workforce training. That's a lot of different components. So why is it important to have all that together?
I'll certainly let Scott and Ellie chime in. Let me just give a geographic hub context to this. Southern Virginia, Region 3, you hear this all used interchangeably. Really, geographically, we're speaking is starting in Brunswick County on the east, following the Carolina 58 corridor out to Patrick County, then north to Buckingham, south along the south side of the James to Amelia, and everything in between. It's the largest of the 9 Go Virginia regions. It's size of Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. It's the least populated densely. So the idea of doing this as a hub is a scale kind of issue because we're not in a dense metropolitan area. We're in a very large geographic area. So actually having something that is a centralized place in the Institute has that history. It has that capacity and certainly is recognized as a center. And so having the Institute and certainly the CEA Innovation Facility be the fulcrum, the logical place where this work is done and facilitated made a lot of sense to us going on. So what the hub does, how does it do it? I'll certainly let Scott and Ellie talk to that.
I'll just add, just quickly to step back for a moment. That's really neat as a scientist to be involved in economic development, and especially in an emerging market that has such potential. I've mentioned what CEA is sort of abstract, generally, but the reality is that people are changing the way they eat. People do not want food with pesticide on it. They want food to be fresh, and they want in general they want jobs created. So this really addresses all of those. And as scientists, we take a lot of direction from companies and what they need, but we oftentimes get buried in the weeds and focus on doing as much as we can to help the companies out. The neat thing to me about this strategy is it lets us take a step back and say, where should we go next? What's important by third-party people? And then how can we leverage what we already have, what's been an investment by the state over the years, the Tobacco Commission and others, and how can we leverage that along with our partnership with Virginia Tech and Dr. Evans and Dr. Kaylee South and others? How can we leverage all of that to help economic development? So to me, it's something that I'd just like to mention that's very cool as a scientist, to be nerdy but also involved in transforming a region and beyond is something I think pretty unique.
I'll just add, related to the hub model, it's something we've seen with other new industries that have cropped up in Virginia and throughout the nation, that there's a need for sort of a backbone organization that has expertise and is trusted in the region and can coordinate a lot of different folks around these issues. And so you can think of a hub as a central source, but you also have a hub with spokes, right? So it's not like everyone is coming into this hub at IALR. It's also a source of information that can then go out into these spokes, into these regions. And so think of it also like a virtual hub, information source. It is a physical place, but it has presence throughout Region 3.
I mean, all of you touched on, the geography of this, as well as the economic significance of what this hub will do and of this sector in general throughout our region. I want to just pose the question of, and I know the roadmap outlines this pretty in a lot of detail, but sort of what is the state or the current status of the CEA sector in Go Virginia Region 3 specifically? And I mean, we can talk about the Commonwealth. I know that's a very high priority for the governor down, that CEA is a very high priority. But what is the current state or current status of the CEA industry, and what is the potential for this industry in our region as an economic driver?
Yeah, I could just say briefly that the state in general is very excited about CEA, with companies like AeroFarms moving here, with Plenty building the world's largest campus of CEA outside of Richmond. The governor has publicly stated multiple times that he's interested in making Virginia the destination state in the U.S., if not the world, for CEA companies because of our positioning, our localities. But he also has included tax incentives. He wants to have funding for programs like ours. And together with workforce training, he's laid out a pretty good plan as far as ways to make Virginia a unique spot. And I'll just also say that overseas in Europe and even in the Americas, we have clusters of CEA in Canada, we have clusters of CEA in Mexico, and we have clusters of CEA all across Europe. But in the United States, there's really not one. So why not us? We're just hours of drive between a lot of the population of the United States. So on the economic potential side, I think that's the foundation.
Region 3 has a lot of assets as it relates to CEA. We heard from our stakeholders that the history of agriculture and the pride that the region has in agriculture is a really big asset as we seek to grow sort of more higher technology industries. We also find that there's a high concentration of certifications that are related to CEA from, I think, 12 different higher education institutes in Region 3, so a lot of existing assets and existing ideas. I think those are just the two extra things beyond the economics that we see as why Region 3 makes a lot of sense is really poised for growth.
One thing I would add on that, I think one thing that the strategy has brought forward that I think we all intuitively knew is that CEA is for large companies like AeroFarms or Plenty, the investor-owned large operations that are well capitalized, but it also creates an opportunity for existing farmers, existing producers, as well as folks that may want to do this as a supplement to their household income and kind of growing specialty product for a farmer's market or a farm-to-table restaurant or things like that. And we also heard today, and I think there's a lot of potential here, of adaptively reusing some of these older buildings in some of our smaller towns' main streets, because the infrastructure is there, the water, the sewer, the electricity, and open floor plans, and so that kind of lends itself to doing that. So we see this as a macro and a micro opportunity for business here in Southern Virginia.
No, that definitely makes sense. So the hub, will sort of, as you all alluded to, it's sort of both a center geographically for these organizations, whoever we're working with, to come to, but also something that goes out to these communities that are within Go Virginia Region 3. What are the other, primary strategies that this hub will be carrying out? What are the primary recommendations for how we move, the how of how we move this industry forward here in Southern Virginia and Go Region 3?
I'll say quickly that one thing that I noticed about the roadmap is that it leverages what we already have. It leverages our strengths. So at the Institute, we have a wonderful research program focused on applied research. We have the CEA Center, which houses Dr. Kaylee South, who has 30% extension time. So you talk about workforce development. Everything that's mentioned in that strategy is something that really fits within our wheelhouse. It's not a big, gigantic investment to get something started that you don't necessarily know about. We already have a terrific team in line, and we're just we're excited about the possibility of growing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, specifically, we see the hub continuing to serve existing CEA firms and operations in Region 3 in Virginia, providing them technical assistance, looking at things like profitability, how do you scale up, all the things that Scott and his colleagues do to help CEA companies grow, or companies that would like to be supply chain part of the CEA supply chain, how can they participate? The hub also serves a role of educating and informing policymakers and partners about what CEA is and what the potential is. Also supporting new entrepreneurs, including existing producers. Providing some specialized technical assistance, supporting the acceleration of site development, what sites would be best suited for different types of CEA related businesses, and then also continuing to work to close the talent gap and workforce gap through programs like GoTech, for example.
And that's a great, you mentioning GoTech in that program. I think that's for those who don't know, that's basically a program in middle schools providing hands-on introductions to a variety of career opportunities, and one of those is CEA, along with, they have welding and electrical engineering and robotics and all sorts of things that they're providing middle schoolers a sort of hands-on introduction to. But on that workforce development component for CEA, I guess what are sort of the skills and the jobs that are within this industry? Because, that ultimately ties into why this is important for our region, is that this industry is would create additional and higher value jobs.
Because this is in a controlled environment, it requires a certain skill set that is more applicable to kind of indoor, I don't want to say manufacturing, but creating something in a value-added process. And so the skills that are needed are typical skills that are used in other types of indoor production type of things. And so, and so that's why there's a lot of appeal, because there's a lot of capacity now in the education system to tailor skill development, skill acquisition for these types of jobs.
Yeah, I can just say that, in practice, what we do here at our CEA Center, it takes lots of skills in computer science and robotics. There's a lot of automation involved. We even go beyond that to plant image analysis and computer vision. It takes that plant science component. So it really is a diverse set of skills that are high tech that's needed for these CEA companies to succeed.
And in our interviews with existing CEA companies, we found, again, a wide range of occupations and skill sets, like computer and information system managers. You have people working in shipping and receiving and maintenance, and also those scientists and people who currently work in farming, like farm workers.
Bryan, you said a few minutes ago that, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I know the Secretary of Agriculture was here this morning and said basically the same thing. If you don't know where you're going, it's a lot harder to get there. So same concept, though, that outlining the importance of having an idea of what we're trying to accomplish with CEA in this region. What are sort of now that this strategy has been this strategy has been finalized, presented to these groups. What are the next steps? What are we hoping to see happen next?
I think one of the things, the challenge with anything new is that it's new. It's shiny. It's exciting, particularly in the world of workforce and economic development. And so it's kind of like, I don't want to say cats chasing the shiny thing, but it's a little bit and so I think the strategy did a great job. In there, it's not vanilla because there's something in there for everybody. I don't want to mean that in a derisive way, but more or less, there are things that can align with groups that do this workforce, economic, entrepreneurship, all the things that are now being done in other areas of the economy can now also tuck in CEA as part of their portfolio of work, to create high-paying jobs that are forward-looking. I think one of the things at least exciting for me, and I'll shamelessly say it is shiny and bright and I'm chasing it, is that this region, the Institute, we were first movers in this, in the state as a region. No other region has done a strategy like this. No other region has innovation center with a partnership like Virginia Tech and the Institute have brought to bear. So I think we're going to be recognized as kind of creating the wheel, frankly, this in the state and perhaps nationally. I don't want to conflate this too far, but I think one of the challenges that Ellie and her colleagues had is that this is such a new world when it comes to economic and workforce development, that a lot of this had to be kind of created and teased out from existing data. So what excites me is we are really on the leading edge of something that can create a growing and sustainable sector here in Southern Virginia to benefit folks that are here that have yet to come here with good paying jobs and stable economy.
And I can add to that the governor has stated that we have a head start in this area because of our center and because of all the support network and stuff. And I know for a fact that we have, at our Controlled Environment Ag Summit that we hosted this past year, it was the second year, and we had 240 people from all over the world come, but there were people from Georgia, there were people from Iowa, there were people from other states wanting to know what we're doing. Because, again, we're that far ahead, and just demonstrates that we are leaders in this area, and we have, again, like the governor said, a head start, so let's take advantage of it.
Just to pick up on that, I think one of the things you asked, Caleb, was what do we do next? Well, there's a responsibility with that. Certainly the governor, Secretary of Law, any number of entities, the Tobacco Commission, Go Virginia, for instance, certainly want to provide resources to do work in CEA. But with that comes a fiduciary responsibility to expend those resources wisely and successfully. And so one of the things that's going to be incumbent on me and all the folks that I work with, my colleagues, is to get our arms around this and then start funding those things that are responsible but productive. And therein lies the challenge of what is responsible, what's productive, and what can be used. And that is foundational so that it is kind of an incremental process to ramp us up. We can't go from 0 to 50. We're going to have to go to 0 to 10, 15, and start increasing it. But I believe, as Scott said, and certainly others have chimed in, is that we are leading this. And so with that comes the advantage of folks looking to us to kind of set the stage.
And I think, Scott, I mean, you mentioned this too, that a lot of what the strategy outlines are things we're already doing. You know, it's outlining things we're already doing and how to expand those things is a big portion of that. So that makes sense. That would, you're not. We've talked about we're creating the wheel for as far as what we're doing, but this is not a strategy of saying this is something completely brand new. This is sort of expanding on what's already happening across our region.
Yeah, and I'll add that, we're doing a lot of the working with the companies, and we're doing a lot of things that just were organic. They just fit naturally. The companies came to us. They have problems that we could address. We have the skills and the equipment that we've invested in over time. But there's a lot of the strategy that we're not doing. And a lot of that is things that we've talked about, like, man, we really need to have a marketing piece to be able to share what we're doing more broadly. We don't have that. With this strategy, it kind of validates the things that we have been doing and helps us provides a roadmap, as it implies, as to those areas that will be beneficial, such as supporting entrepreneurship. That's something that we just have not done a lot. We enjoy working with entrepreneurs, but it's pretty much them coming to us with their idea and then us helping them test a little bit, but leading them through that process, providing opportunities for farmers who are interested in getting into CEA. A lot of what you learn when you get into something new, sometimes you learn you don't want to do it. So we need to provide people that opportunity to see whether they do or don't. I really enjoyed that component, especially of the roadmap, that smaller, mid-size component. In Pennsylvania County, I grew up in really the northern part of the county, basically southern Campbell County, but a lot of people's families worked in tobacco, and they had a full-time job, but they also came home as supplemental income. They grew tobacco and made like $4,000 an acre. So I think there's a big opportunity here to have CEA fuel growth of income for both big farmers, but also smaller farmers. Because one thing that I've learned over the years is that farmers will grow if there's a market. And so one thing we can do is help them create a market. And another thing we can do is to help them find a pathway to get to that market.
Scott reminded me, I'm going to take a big step back and get up to about 50,000 feet. One of the things that is vitally important in economic development, economic transformation, is frankly trying to increase household income. It's good to get high-wage jobs, but that person usually comes from a household. It could be a household of one or many, typical kind of family, what we think about. As household income increases, educational attainment increases, health outcomes become better, discretionary incomes get better to buy reliable transportation, housing stock, the quality of housing goes up because of that increased wealth in households. So back to these small producers, it gets back to the time where you could grow tobacco and supplement your income from the farm with your off-farm income. I think CEA offers that new version of that old paradigm. And so that is one thing that certainly gives me a lot of excitement, because what's old is new again, but it's done in a different environment with innovation and technology driving those opportunities.
That's really. I was talking to someone a few weeks ago who's working here at the Institute right now, and he said that his family has a farm in New York, and they're looking at adding just like a small hydroponic system to be able to grow some lettuce as a supplemental income. And I think, as I've thought about CEA since I've been here, it's much more, Aero Farms, plenty. What's the name of the company in Martinsville?
Blue Ridge Aquaculture.
Blue Ridge Aquaculture. Those big producers, but those smaller ones, I see how this strategy really focuses on that, and how, as you said, that focusing on that household income on the smaller entrepreneur level, that's really important too.
And I just want to add to this that simultaneously, there are food hubs popping up. There are food auctions popping up. There's one in Franklin County, one in Concord. There's opportunities for smaller growers to get things to market. Again, a lot of it is about market on the small side. So I think it's interesting that these things are coinciding. Year-round growth in hydroponics plus local markets for smaller growers. Those two things together can be really big and synergistic.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Well, that's all the questions that I have. I mean, I think this is obviously this is a long document, but this is, I think, really outlines the importance of this industry and does a great job of showing what we're trying to do for this region.
Sure. If I could, and I would be remiss, certainly, if we didn't mention this. This is about growing things. CEA is agriculture controlled environment, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that has to be manufactured. The lighting, the heating, the water systems, the HVAC, the sensors, the automation. And so what we have with the CAA Innovation Center is actually creating those parts and pieces that go into actually doing this work. And so some business has to manufacture and assemble that, translate that research into a product. That really builds on the advanced manufacturing legacy that's here in Southern Virginia. Mm-hmm. So this is not only building on an agricultural legacy, it's building on advanced manufacturing. What I'm also excited is we may have opportunity in packaging of looking at some of the existing companies and working with them to see if there are other markets that through some change in their process, expansion of the process, they could open up new markets, create more jobs, hire more people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's a really good point about this combines. I mean, obviously, agriculture is Virginia's #1 industry. I don't know exactly where manufacturing is on the list, but I know it's high up there. So this combining both of those together definitely is an industry that makes sense to focus on. I'll open it up to all three of you if there's any other parting thoughts or ideas or comments that you would want to share.
Part of this was taking a little bit of a liberty with an idea. That here you had a research investment made at the Institute and by Virginia Tech, and then I think it was incumbent on me and my fellow economic and workforce development professionals. Okay, what do we do with this? And through Ellie and her team have now given us, okay, here's what you can think about doing. We may not implement all of the things today or tomorrow, but we'll get to them because these are all very realistic. It's a matter of picking and choosing and then trying to find the resources and the sustainability of those to go, and I'm confident we'll get there, absolutely confident.
I'm just excited about the potential. Again, this is an emerging market. We're at the right place, the right time. Bryan mentioned earlier when you have the political will and the resources that come together, that's really the right time to do something. 10 years ago would have been too soon. LED lights weren't even popular. 10 years in the future may be too late because there's other states that's going to jump on this. So we're in the right spot at the right time, I think, to really move this industry forward in the state of Virginia with the government support behind us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Scott, Ellie, Bryan, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Megabytes, IALR's on-site cafe features everyday favorites, convenient ordering options, and an eager staff ready to welcome and serve you. Our enticing menus offer something for everyone from a fresh, well-stocked salad bar, wraps, sandwiches, and our rotating hot buffet offered on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Megabytes is open Monday through Friday from 9:15 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. To view menus and for more information, visit IALR.org/megabytes.